The unexpected arrival. The vastness of space stretched out before the mighty Galactic Empire, an empire known for its overwhelming power and far-reaching influence. For centuries, they had crushed rebellions, conquered planets, and ruled without challenge. The Galactic Empire had seen countless fleets, from the smallest warships to massive armadas, but nothing had ever prepared them for what they were about to face. At the heart of the Empire's command center, a room full of military leaders and commanders was buzzing with activity. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by a high-pitched alarm. A young officer, eyes wide with panic, rushed forward to report. "Admiral, a fleet is appearing on our radar. It's coming from the edge of the galaxy." The Admiral, a seasoned veteran named Oris Marn, turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Explain yourself." The officer quickly tapped his screen, trying to make sense of the data. "Sir, the fleet's coordinates are untraceable. They're not from any known systems. We have no record of them anywhere in our intelligence files." The room fell silent. Untraceable, unknown. These words sent chills through every officer present. The Galactic Empire had mapped the stars, studied every corner of the galaxy, and scouted for any sign of rebellion or war. Nothing had escaped their notice. And yet, here was a fleet they had no knowledge of. A fleet that had appeared out of nowhere. "Are you sure of this?" Admiral Marn asked, his voice cold and sharp. "Yes, Admiral," the officer confirmed, his voice trembling. "There is no record of them, but they're coming in fast. They're almost on us." Admiral Marn's eyes narrowed even further. "Prepare for battle," he ordered. "Launch all scouts. Get us visual confirmation. We need to know what we're dealing with." The room buzzed with frantic activity as officers rushed to their stations, activating ships and preparing for the unknown threat. But despite the flurry of movements, no one could shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. For the first time in decades, the Empire was on the defensive. Out in the cold depths of space, the unknown fleet moved forward. It was unlike anything the Empire had seen. The ships were sleek and dark, appearing as shadows against the stars. Their design was both elegant and terrifying. The scouts sent out by the Empire reported that the fleet consisted of ships large enough to rival the Empire's own dreadnoughts, but these ships were different. They were old, and yet there was something about them that radiated a power that the Empire had not felt in a long time. As the fleet drew closer, the Galactic Empire's command center struggled to gather more information. But the closer they got, the more difficult it became. Every attempt to scan the fleet was blocked by some kind of interference, something that the Empire's technology couldn't penetrate. It was as if these ships had a mind of their own, deliberately hiding their true capabilities. "Sir," an officer spoke urgently, "we've tried everything. We can't penetrate their shields. We can't even get a clear visual. They're blocking every scan." Admiral Marn clenched his fists. This was unlike anything he had ever encountered. The Empire had the most advanced technology in the galaxy. There was no ship that should be able to hide from them. And yet, here was a fleet that was seemingly untouchable. "Set course for the fleet," Marn ordered. "We'll engage them head-on. No more waiting." As the Empire's warships moved to intercept, the mystery fleet finally came into view. It was more than a fleet. It was an armada. Ships the size of small cities, each with an appearance that seemed both ancient and terrifying. The ships glowed faintly with an eerie blue light, and their engines hummed with a power that was far beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. There was a brief moment of stillness as both fleets faced each other. The tension in the air was palpable. The Empire's commanders waited, ready to unleash their firepower. But the mystery fleet did not move. It simply waited, as if it had all the time in the galaxy. "Why aren't they firing?" one of the officers asked, his voice tense with confusion. Admiral Marn kept his gaze locked on the fleet. His gut told him something was wrong. This wasn't a standard battle. This wasn't just another enemy to crush. This was something else entirely. Maybe they're waiting for us to make the first move, Marn muttered, his mind racing. He glanced at the main screen, where the massive fleet remained motionless, and felt a growing unease in his stomach. It was as if the enemy knew something he didn't, something he was about to learn the hard way. The silence was deafening. The crew of the Empire's flagship waited for orders, but none came. They were paralyzed by the mystery of this unknown fleet. What could they do? How could they win? These questions rang through every mind on board. Then, without warning, the enemy fleet moved, slowly at first, then with a sudden burst of speed. It was as if the fleet had been waiting for this very moment, as if they had been calculating everything to perfection. Admiral Marn's heart raced. The unknown fleet was moving to engage. But this wasn't just another battle. This was the beginning of something bigger, something far beyond his understanding. The Empire had never faced anything like this before, and for the first time in decades, Admiral Marn felt fear creeping into his heart. The unthinkable encounter. Admiral Marn's hand hovered over the command console, his heart pounding in his chest. The Empire had never been on the back foot before. They had always been the ones to dictate terms, to crush their enemies with overwhelming might. But now, standing face to face with an unknown force, the tables had turned. "Prepare all defensive shields. Get ready for engagement," Marn shouted, his voice unwavering despite the turmoil in his mind. He had led countless battles, but this was different. There was an unfamiliar sense of dread creeping over him, a sensation he couldn't shake. The enemy fleet, these strange ships, were advancing faster than anticipated. They were preparing to strike. The crew of the Empire's flagship scrambled to their positions, but it was clear that they were uneasy. The massive screens displayed the advancing ships, each one resembling an ancient warship from a forgotten time. Their sleek black hulls glowed faintly, an eerie blue hue that contrasted sharply against the deep void of space. "Admiral, we are within firing range," an officer reported. "Should we initiate our assault?" Marn hesitated. The enemy fleet had not fired a single shot. Instead, it moved forward like a dark shadow, ominous and unyielding. The Empire had faced countless enemies, but nothing that felt like this. These ships didn't seem to fear their power. They were waiting. "Hold fire," Marn ordered, gripping the armrest of his chair. "We need more information. What is their purpose? Why haven't they attacked?" The unknown fleet continued to advance. It didn't take long before the Empire's ships were locked in a standoff with the strange vessels. The tension in the command room was palpable. The silence was almost suffocating. Then, a message came through. It was faint at first, distorted by interference, but the words were unmistakable. The voice was human, unmistakably so. "We are the human fleet. Stand down, Empire." The message sent a shockwave through the command center. The crew exchanged confused looks. Humans? Impossible. The Empire had long since considered humanity a minor species, a primitive race on the edge of the galaxy. There was no way these could be human ships. "Is this some kind of joke?" one officer muttered, glancing at the admiral. "Impossible," Marn muttered under his breath. He felt a chill run down his spine as he absorbed the words. It wasn't a trick. The voice sounded authoritative, confident, but it didn't make sense. The Empire had not encountered a single human fleet in centuries. Humanity was nothing more than a distant memory, a race that had been wiped out during the early years of the Empire's rise. He turned to his tactical officer. "Check the fleet's records again. Analyze every ship. There has to be some mistake. These can't be human." The officer tapped away at his console, his fingers moving with precision. "Admiral, I'm running all scans. There's nothing in our database. There's no record of these ships, no record of any human fleet in this sector. These ships, they're unlike anything we've ever seen." Marn clenched his fists. "What do you mean, unlike anything we've ever seen?" We have the most advanced scanning systems in the galaxy. You're telling me that the most basic records of humanity have vanished from our systems? Yes, Admiral, the officer confirmed. It's like they never existed. The room fell into stunned silence. The only sound that could be heard was the hum of the ship's engines, the steady pulse of the Empire's powerful war machine. The thought that the very existence of humanity had been erased, that their history had somehow been erased from all Imperial records, it was beyond comprehension. Admiral Marn turned back to the view screen, his mind racing. The human fleet was still there, looming ahead. They hadn't fired, hadn't made any hostile movements. It was as if they were waiting for the Empire to make the first move. It felt like a trap that Marn wasn't sure he wanted to walk into. "Open a channel," Marn ordered. "I want to speak to them directly." The communications officer quickly opened the link, and a calm, commanding voice filled the room. "This is Admiral Marn of the Galactic Empire. Who are you, and what is the purpose of your fleet?" The human voice on the other end responded without hesitation, but there was an underlying strength in the tone, something that Marn hadn't expected from the so-called primitive humans. "We are humanity, and we have come to take our place among the stars once again. This is our warning to you, Empire. Stand down or face the consequences." The words sent a shiver down Marn's spine. Humanity. Had these ships truly come from the species the Empire had long ago dismissed as insignificant? Their technology was far beyond anything the Empire had encountered, their ships sleek, powerful, and entirely unknown. How was this possible? He glanced around the command room, seeing the confusion mirrored in the faces of his officers. No one knew how to react. This wasn't a rebellion or an uprising. This wasn't even a battle for territory. This was something far more ominous. The human fleet wasn't here for conquest. They were here for something else entirely. "Prepare to engage," Marn said, his voice filled with a cold determination. "We'll make our stand. No one threatens the Empire. No one." But even as he said the words, he felt doubt gnawing at the back of his mind. For the first time, he wasn't so sure of the Empire's invincibility. The unveiling of humanity's might. Admiral Marn sat in his command chair, eyes fixed on the view screen in front of him. The fleet of unknown ships, now confirmed to be human, loomed just beyond the Empire's reach. His mind raced, trying to piece together the situation. How could this be possible? Humanity was not supposed to be capable of such power. Yet here they were, daring to face down the might of the Galactic Empire. The communication officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we've received another transmission from the human fleet. They demand an immediate response." Marn's eyes narrowed. They were persistent, no doubt. The nerve of these humans to think they could just demand anything from the Empire. "Patch it through," he ordered, his voice filled with authority. The screen flickered, and the image of a human officer appeared. He wore a uniform that was nothing like anything Marn had ever seen before, sleek, modern, but somehow old-fashioned at the same time. The officer's face was calm, his expression unreadable. "This is Commander Eleanor Ross of the United Human Fleet," the officer began, her voice cool but firm. "We have come to claim what is ours. The Galactic Empire's time of dominance is over." The room went silent. Marn's eyes widened, and he gripped the armrests of his chair as he heard those words. The human fleet didn't just want peace. They wanted to challenge the Empire's rule. The audacity, the insanity. How could anyone, even a species as resilient as humanity, think they could stand against the might of the Galactic Empire? "You must be mad," Marn finally said, his voice cold. "The Empire is the greatest power in the galaxy. You are nothing more than a shadow, a forgotten relic from a time long gone. You have no place here." Commander Ross didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "We are not a relic," she said, her voice steady. "We are humanity, and we have evolved. You underestimated us once before, and you will not make the same mistake again." Marn's mind spun. How could this be true? Humanity, long thought to be nothing more than a primitive species, had somehow evolved beyond recognition. Their technology had surpassed anything the Empire had ever encountered. These were not the same humans the Empire had wiped out in the past. No, these humans were different, more powerful, and they were ready to prove it. Prepare for a demonstration of our power, Commander Ross continued. We'll show you what we are capable of, and we'll give you a choice: surrender or face total annihilation. The transmission cut off abruptly, and Marn was left staring at the black screen. The room buzzed with nervous energy. His officers whispered among themselves, uncertain of what had just transpired. The confidence that had once radiated from the Empire's war machine now seemed fragile, as if it might shatter at any moment. Admiral, one of his tactical officers, spoke up. They're not bluffing. I've analyzed their fleet's composition. These ships are beyond our capabilities. Their weapon systems, we've never seen anything like it. Marn gritted his teeth. It was true. The human ships didn't just look different. They felt different. The technology they displayed was far ahead of the Empire's. It wasn't just their weaponry either. The ship's shields were impervious to the Empire's scans, their stealth systems nearly impossible to detect. It was as if they were untouchable. How did they achieve this? Marn whispered, more to himself than anyone else. How did humanity become so powerful? The tactical officer hesitated before speaking. Admiral, we've received reports from across the galaxy. There have been whispers, stories of humans gaining access to forgotten technologies, of unearthing ancient powers that were thought to be myths. Marn's brow furrowed. Forgotten technologies. Myths. It sounded like nothing more than old rumors, things that didn't hold any weight. But as he looked at the strange, sleek human ships, a nagging feeling began to form in the back of his mind. What if there was truth to it? What if humanity had found something ancient, that had made them stronger than anyone could have imagined? He looked to his officers, his mind racing. We must prepare. Get the fleet ready for action. We cannot let these humans threaten the Empire. But even as he said the words, he knew that something had shifted. The balance of power had tipped. The Empire, for the first time in millennia, was facing an opponent that could not be easily defeated. Meanwhile, Commander Ross stood at the center of the human flagship, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The battle was still hours away, but she was already preparing herself for what was to come. The Galactic Empire, so full of arrogance and strength, would soon feel the weight of humanity's newfound power. This is it, Ross murmured to herself. This is our moment. She turned to her crew. Prepare for battle. The Empire will soon learn that we are not the same humans they once underestimated. We are the future, and we will show them what true power looks like. The tension in the galaxy was palpable. Two mighty forces, once distant and unknown to each other, now stood on the brink of a clash that would determine the future of the stars. The humans, having risen from obscurity, now stood tall against the Galactic Empire. Would the Empire stand strong, or would it crumble beneath the weight of humanity's power? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Empire's response. Admiral Marn paced back and forth in his war room, his thoughts a whirlwind of fear and strategy. The transmission from the humans echoed in his mind. Surrender or face total annihilation. The arrogance of those words haunted him. How could they be so certain of their power? What was it that made humanity so sure they could challenge the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known? Marn stopped pacing and looked up at the large display screen before him. The fleet was ready. His fleet was the pride of the Galactic Empire. Unbeatable, or so he had thought. But now, standing against this mysterious human force, he wasn't sure of anything. Admiral, we've received another transmission from the human fleet, came the voice of his communications officer, breaking his concentration. Marn's heart skipped a beat. Was this the moment? The moment the humans would show their hand and revealed the full extent of their power. "Put it through," Marn ordered, his voice steady, though his mind raced with anticipation. The view screen flickered and another human appeared. This time it was a man, his expression hard and unwavering. His uniform was different from Commander Ross's, yet equally imposing. The man's piercing blue eyes locked onto Marn's. "Admiral Marn." The man's voice was calm, almost too calm. "I am General Jonathan Blake of the United Human Fleet. You may be wondering why we've come. The answer is simple." The general paused, as though allowing the weight of his words to settle. "We've come to take what is ours. You have enslaved entire star systems for far too long. The era of the Galactic Empire is over. Humanity's rise has begun." Marn clenched his fists. It was happening. The humans were serious. They weren't just testing the waters. They were challenging the Empire itself. The arrogance they displayed reminded him of the earliest days of the Empire, when they first expanded their reach and crushed every force that dared oppose them. "I've heard your threats," Marn replied coldly, trying to maintain control. "You think you can take the Empire down? You think you can challenge thousands of years of dominance with a handful of ships? You are nothing compared to the might of the Empire." The human general's gaze hardened. "You're wrong. It's not about the size of the fleet. It's about the will of the people. And the will of humanity is to be free. You will find, Admiral, that we fight with a strength unlike anything you've ever encountered." Marn's mind raced. The human fleet wasn't just a collection of ships. It was a symbol of something bigger, something much more dangerous. Humanity had awakened, and they had come to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The Empire's iron grip, which had held so many for so long, was now in jeopardy. "We are not backing down," Marn muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing. He had no intention of showing weakness to this human general, but deep down, he felt the tremor of uncertainty. "Prepare our weapons," Marn ordered his officers. "The time for talks is over. We will show them that no one challenges the Galactic Empire." On the human flagship, General Blake stood tall, watching the Imperial fleet through the large viewports. The time had come to act. The Empire was not going to back down easily, but humanity was ready. It was a strange thing, this feeling of power, of knowing they had the upper hand. Blake could see it in the eyes of his crew, the same determination that had carried them to this point. He turned to Commander Ross, who had been standing beside him, silent as always. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice calm but full of anticipation. "We're ready, General," she replied, her gaze fixed on the enemy fleet. "Humanity's future starts now." Blake nodded. "Activate the fleet's systems. Prepare for engagement." There was no turning back now. The battle would soon begin. Across the galaxy, the eyes of billions were fixed on the impending war. The once unstoppable Empire was now in the crosshairs of a force it had underestimated, humanity, and with every passing moment, the tension between the two sides grew, thickening in the void of space. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and the future of the Empire seemed uncertain. Could the Empire hold its ground? Or would humanity's unexpected rise shatter the centuries-old reign of the Galactic Empire? Only time would tell. The clash of forces. The battle began without warning. Admiral Marn's orders were swift, but there was a slight hesitation in his voice, one that did not go unnoticed by his officers. The human fleet, with its sleek, advanced ships, had already positioned itself in perfect formation, awaiting the Empire's first move. They were not intimidated. They were resolute, and that terrified Marn more than anything else. "Fire at will." Marn's voice rang through the war room, sharp and commanding. His fleet responded immediately, massive energy blasts streaking across the vast emptiness of space toward the approaching human armada. But the humans weren't as easy a target as the Empire had expected. They moved with precision, each ship weaving in and out of the deadly fire, dodging and countering with their own weapons. The human ships were smaller, faster, and more agile than Marn's battleships. Their energy shields shimmered brightly as they deflected the incoming blasts. But what struck Marn the most was how coordinated they were. There was no panic, no disarray. Every ship, every crew member was in perfect unison. "What are they doing?" Marn demanded, his eyes wide with disbelief as the human fleet continued to evade and retaliate. "Admiral, their ships are using advanced maneuvers," one of his officers reported. "Their AI systems are synchronized. It's as if they're one entity, not a group of separate ships." Marn's mind raced. AI. Synchronized tactics. How was this possible? He had assumed that the humans, with their relatively young technological development, would be no match for the Empire's might. But this was beyond anything he had expected. "Prepare to engage the dreadnoughts," Marn ordered, his voice growing more forceful. "We need to show them the full strength of the Empire." But as he issued the command, he felt a chill run down his spine. A strange sensation gripped him, a growing sense of dread that spread through his body like a cold wind. On the human side, General Blake stood at the helm of his flagship, his expression unreadable. The battle had begun, and the Empire's opening salvo had been ferocious. But the human fleet was holding its ground, countering each strike with well-coordinated tactics. Blake could feel the excitement building among his crew. They were doing it. They were holding their own against the Empire. "Commander Ross," Blake said, his eyes focused on the advancing Empire ships. "It's time. Deploy the quantum phase shift." Ross gave a sharp nod. "Deploying now, General." Within moments, the human fleet began to flicker in and out of existence, phasing between real space and a quantum dimension. It was a technology the Empire had never encountered, a weapon developed in secret by humanity's greatest minds. The ships blinked in and out of reality, dodging Imperial fire and reappearing at devastatingly close range. The Empire's weapons couldn't track them, and their shields, so powerful against conventional attacks, were useless against this new form of warfare. Marn watched in horror as one of his flagship's dreadnoughts was struck by a sudden burst of energy. The ship shuddered violently, and the lights flickered before going out completely. The dreadnought was gone, disintegrated in a single devastating strike from a human ship that had materialized right in front of it. "Impossible," Marn shouted, slamming his fist against the command console. "How are they doing this? This isn't possible." His officers could only look on in helplessness as the battle began to slip out of their control. On the human side, Blake could feel the momentum shifting. His fleet was overwhelming the Empire's defenses, and the once proud warships of the Galactic Empire were beginning to crumble under the relentless assault. The human ships had perfected their phase-shifting tactics, making it nearly impossible for the Empire to land a decisive blow. But Blake wasn't done yet. "Initiate Phase 2, he ordered. Across the human fleet, a new wave of ships emerged from the shadows. Large, imposing warships that dwarfed their earlier vessels. These were the real weapons, the culmination of humanity's secret war efforts. Armed with advanced particle beams and gravity disruptors, these new ships were designed to tear through the heart of the Empire's forces. The first of these ships opened fire, sending a massive pulse of energy toward the nearest Imperial destroyer. The blast hit with pinpoint accuracy, and in a split second, the ship was reduced to molten fragments, floating in the vastness of space. Marn's eyes widened. He had never seen anything like this before. The sheer destructive power of the human fleet was unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. It was as though they had been preparing for this moment for centuries, and Marn now realized he had underestimated them. The war was no longer a battle of ships and weapons. It was a battle of survival, a test of wills between two forces that had never before faced such a direct confrontation. The Galactic Empire, for all its might and grandeur, was now fighting for its very existence. But as the battle raged on, one thing became clear. Humanity had come to claim its place in the galaxy, and nothing would stop them. The Empire's struggle. Admiral Marn stood at the front of his command center, his face etched with disbelief and frustration. The human fleet's relentless assault had forced him into a corner. The once mighty Imperial armada was crumbling under the unexpected power and tactics of the humans. He gritted his teeth, unwilling to admit defeat, but it was becoming increasingly clear that his forces were being overwhelmed. "Report," Marn demanded, his voice sharp with urgency. "Admiral," a nervous officer called out, "our dreadnoughts are falling. The new human warships, they've breached our shields. Our weapons are ineffective against their phase-shifting tactics. We can't track them, and our artillery can't land a single shot." Marn clenched his fists, his mind racing for a solution. The Empire had never faced such an adversary before. The humans had surpassed their expectations, breaking through their defenses and sending shockwaves through the heart of the Empire. Marn's confidence had been shattered, and now he was unsure if the Empire could survive this war. "We need to regroup," Marn finally said, his voice grim. "Prepare the retreat protocol. We can't afford to lose any more ships." As the orders were relayed, Marn stared out the massive viewport of his flagship. Through the dark void of space, he saw the Empire's once proud fleet begin to retreat, the mighty warships slowly pulling back under the crushing pressure of the human assault. But as the retreat unfolded, something unexpected happened. On the human side, General Blake stood in the war room of his flagship, watching the retreat unfold through his own ship's sensors. He saw the Imperial fleet falter, their ships pulling back, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself a small smile. Victory was within their grasp, but Blake knew the war wasn't over. The Empire was still a formidable force, and they would not surrender easily. "Phase 3, Blake ordered, his voice calm but resolute. His command triggered the final phase of humanity's plan, a maneuver that would send the Empire a message they could never ignore. In an instant, the human fleet shifted tactics again. Ships began to converge on the Imperial fleet, but this time, they weren't attacking in a traditional way. Instead, Blake had ordered a precision strike on the Empire's supply lines. Human ships, fast and nimble, phased in and out of reality, cutting through the Empire's vulnerable supply convoys and communication lines. As they did, the Empire's ability to maintain its fighting force began to crumble. The Imperial ships were running low on ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements. They couldn't sustain their counterattacks without the vital supplies. "Admiral Marn," one of his officers said nervously, "we're running out of options. We can't sustain this fight without the supply lines. Our ships are vulnerable. The humans have cut us off." Marn's face darkened. The humans were not just fighting a battle of ships. They were waging a war of attrition, slowly starving the Empire's ability to fight. He had underestimated humanity's cunning, and now his fleet was on the verge of collapse. "We need reinforcements," Marn growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Send a distress signal to the nearest Imperial fleet. We need support now." But deep down, Marn knew the truth. No reinforcements were coming. The Empire's resources were spread thin across the galaxy, and the humans had just taken a key strategic position in the war. The balance had shifted, and it seemed there was no turning back. Meanwhile, Blake stood firm. His fleet was not only winning the battle but dismantling the Empire's power in a way that had never been done before. The humans had made a mark on galactic history. They had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and their message was clear. Humanity was no longer to be underestimated. On the Empire's side, the retreat continued. The massive ships began to pull back in disarray, their once immense power now a shadow of what it had been. The shock of the defeat was palpable, and the reality of the situation set in. The Empire's dominance was no longer certain. As the battle raged on, Marn found himself wondering just how far humanity was willing to go. They had proven their strength, their resolve, and their ability to fight against overwhelming odds. What more did they have in store? And perhaps more importantly, was the Empire's reign truly over? The final blow. The Empire was on the brink. Their once proud warships, powerful and unstoppable, were now vulnerable and fractured. Admiral Marne had seen the writing on the wall. His fleet was in retreat, and every effort to recover control of the situation had failed. The once unified force that had stood as a symbol of galactic dominance was now a shadow of its former self, crumbling under the weight of humanity's wrath. Inside the war room of the Imperial flagship, Marne's face was a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and a slow-burning fury. His mind raced as he tried to piece together some kind of solution. He had never faced an enemy like this. The humans, mere children in the eyes of the galaxy, had outsmarted, outlasted, and outclassed the Empire's finest warriors. "Admiral, the fleet is in disarray," his communications officer reported, voice trembling. "The supply lines are severed. We have no reinforcements. The humans, they're not just fighting. They're eradicating us." Marne looked at the map on the large screen. The human ships were everywhere, moving in perfect synchrony, cutting through his fleet like a blade through paper. Their phase-shifting technology made it nearly impossible to target them, and their relentless pursuit had taken out all of the Empire's critical infrastructure. It was a matter of time now. Marne stood in silence for a moment, then turned toward his officer. His voice, once strong and commanding, now held an edge of desperation. "We have no choice but to send the message," Marne said. "We must attempt to regroup and warn the Emperor." He knew the Empire's only hope was to rally whatever forces they could and get the message to the Emperor, the last line of defense for their once unimaginable empire. But he knew that it may already be too late. The tide had turned, and the human fleet wasn't showing any signs of slowing down. Meanwhile, on the human side, General Blake stood at the helm of his flagship, the nerve center of humanity's greatest victory. His fleet had achieved the impossible, outsmarting and outmaneuvering the Empire at every turn. They had not only withstood the full force of the Imperial military, but had driven them to the edge of extinction. Blake's eyes were fixed on the live feeds from the battle, his fingers tapping on the console in front of him. Every Imperial ship that retreated, every tactical victory, sent a wave of exhilaration through his entire crew. But Blake knew that they weren't finished. The humans had earned this moment of triumph, but there was still one final push to make. "Phase 4, initiate," Blake ordered calmly. His voice was the signal. A sudden wave of activity coursed through the human fleet as every ship shifted into its final battle posture. Blake's flagship, the heart of the human offensive, was now positioned in front of the retreating Imperial forces. A single decisive strike would be enough to wipe out what remained of the once mighty Empire. With a deep breath, Blake turned his focus back to the fleet-wide comms system. His voice, steady and resolute, carried across every channel. "This is General Blake. The Empire's reign of terror ends today. For every planet they've crushed, for every species they've enslaved, today is our reckoning. We are humanity, and we will never bow to tyranny again." The crew of his ship erupted into cheers. The realization that they were on the cusp of wiping out the Galactic Empire was electrifying. They had fought with every ounce of their strength, and now they could taste the victory they had earned. Back on the Imperial flagship, Admiral Marne stood silently, watching the approaching human fleet. He could feel it now, the pressure bearing down on him, the weight of his empire's demise looming large. In that moment, he understood the full extent of his enemy's power. The humans were relentless, and now they were at the doorstep of the Empire's capital. With one final act of defiance, Marne ordered his ship to charge toward the human fleet, hoping against hope that a last-ditch offensive might turn the tide. But even as the orders were given, he knew it was futile. The Empire had lost, and the human fleet was not here for a negotiation. The first volley of human fire hit the Imperial flagship with devastating force. Marne's ship shuddered under the barrage, the shields barely holding. The humans were closing in, their weapons primed, their tactics flawless. With a final, deafening crash, Marne's flagship was struck at its core. The ship's systems failed in an instant. Marne's last view was of the human ships closing in, unyielding and unstoppable. There was no escape. There was no surrender. The Galactic Empire was no more. General Blake watched as the last of the Imperial fleet disintegrated into the void of space. The victory was absolute. Humanity had not only survived the odds, they had conquered them. The galaxy would never forget the day that humans, once considered weak, had stood up to the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known and torn it apart with sheer willpower and brilliance. The humans had ascended, and the galaxy would tremble at the memory of their wrath.